Hey everybody, welcome to Matt Connarton Unleashed, the television edition, the Thanksgiving edition, really. So happy Thanksgiving to all of you. Depending on when you're watching this, I hope you have a good Thanksgiving, or you are having a good Thanksgiving, or you had a good Thanksgiving, or whatever it may be. So I know a lot of people are traveling today. I also know a lot of people are stuck at home because it's very bad weather. I risked life and limb to be here, but I'm really glad that I have 4 new tires on my car. Thank you, John Heichel at Uptown Auto. Yeah, it's pretty crappy out, but hopefully by tomorrow, if you're watching us live, hopefully by tomorrow, the roads will be better because people will be traveling tomorrow for the big holiday. And Thanksgiving, it's a day that I always look forward to. It's a time for people to be able to spend time with family, loved ones. Those aren't always the same thing, depending on your family dynamic, family and or loved ones, or good friends, or whatever it may be. People have their Thanksgiving rituals and in terms of what they do. And of course, not only Thanksgiving, but the day after Thanksgiving, Black Friday. It's a kind of a tradition. In this country now, people get up extremely obscenely early on Black Friday and go out and do their early morning holiday shopping, or now, at like 5, 6 p.m. Thanksgiving Day. So I kind of have my own ritual. I do on Thanksgiving Day. I don't wait till Black Friday. Thanksgiving Day, I get up extremely early. I'm up before sunrise, and I go out and I try to find some Native Americans, and then what I do is I kill them and steal their stuff. So that way, for one thing, I'm really sort of, I feel, embodying the spirit of Thanksgiving, but also, too, I'm getting a jump on the whole Black Friday thing. And by the way, if any of my family members are watching, I hope you're all still enjoying those authentic Native American flutes that I gave to you last year. I know some of them were a bit worn, but I got them at a bargain, if you know what I mean. So, and by the way, some people get a little judgy about that whole thing, how I celebrate Thanksgiving. And to those people, I say, before you judge me, as far as I'm concerned, it just means that I love Thanksgiving just a little bit more than you do, because I celebrate it all the way. That's the true meaning of Thanksgiving to me. So, and again, I celebrate it and I get a jump on Black Friday. It's kind of like killing 2 braves with 1 stone, if you know what I mean. So, I'm kidding, but I just love giving the PC police something to be angry with me about. So, welcome. If you are watching us on IPMNation.com, you might notice some changes, by the way, just very briefly. Went through last weekend and we kind of took out some of the clutter, kind of streamlined things a bit on the website. IPMNation.com, for those of you who don't know, is 100% mobile friendly, which means that if you go to the website, some of you already know this, of course, but if you go to the website and you are watching it on your mobile device, your smartphone, your tablet, whatever, it automatically reformats in a simplified version to fit your mobile device. Now it's even more mobile friendly because we cleaned out some of the clutter, like I said, and kind of reorganized some things on the site to make it a little easier to navigate. So now more mobile friendly than ever, because I don't know any of the numbers off the top of my head, but I know that statistically more and more people now are accessing content on their mobile devices, not only in terms of watching television, but listening to radio. Sometimes instead of listening to traditional AM or FM radio, I don't know why who listens to AM radio anymore, but sometimes people, like to plug their mobile device in the car, listen to a podcast or whatever, take it on the go. So we've really made IPMNation.com very, very mobile friendly so that you can take advantage of that. And not only that, but also to DKRN.FM, which carries the radio edition of this show, is also very mobile friendly. And actually, if you go to DKRN.FM/mobile, you can get an uber simple version of DKRN.FM, where all you got is a big play button. And you just click that big play button, and that's all you have to do to stream DKRN.FM. So we are trying to stay as ahead of the curve as possible, because a lot of sites that you go to, a lot of internet stations, etc., they are not mobile friendly, or they're sort of mobile friendly, or, you have those sites where you have to put the M before the rest of the domain. We don't have that at IPM. We don't have an m.ipmnation.com. Just go to ipmnation.com. It automatically reformats for you. So making it easy. What we're going to do today, I think, is I'd like to do something a little different. And again, because it is Thanksgiving, I think it would be interesting to, I hope to get some calls about this. Maybe we can share some stories and anecdotes and whatnot. And, just kind of discuss about what Thanksgiving and what the holiday season means to all of us. I'm just kidding. No, we're not really going to do that. I hate that stuff. Don't get me wrong. I love the holidays and I love getting to hang out with my family and everything, but I don't want to talk about it. That's boring. No, we'll do politics as usual. So what I am going to do, however, is let's address the elephant in the room briefly, which is Ferguson. There's really two big stories that have kind of dominated certainly cable news lately. One of them is Ferguson. The other, of course, is immigration. Now, I'm only going to spend a couple minutes on Ferguson. I was talking last night online with some fellow members of the IPM Nation family, Dan Randlett, whom most of you are probably familiar with, Kendra L. Saunders, Chris Pinn from Chris and Johnny's LOL Factory. And, we were talking about how everybody's kind of burnt out on Ferguson. If you watch cable news, particularly in the evening, last few days, it's all Ferguson all the time. So I'm kind of burnt out on it. So I wasn't planning to address it at all. I was going to go right to immigration, which is also a huge story in recent weeks. Not quite as dominant in the last few days as Ferguson, but I'm just, like I said, I have thoughts on it, but I'm going to kind of let them marinate a little bit. And I don't want to say a lot about it today. If you want Ferguson stuff right now, turn on Fox or MSNBC or CNN, and you'll get all the Ferguson you want. I just don't want to deal with it today, except for we will tackle it very briefly in one sense, just sort of tangentially. Not directly, but, which is why I use that word tangentially. It's a good word, huh? It's 4 syllables. Because I wasn't going to talk about it at all, but Time Magazine called him, I believe, if I remember correctly, the most interesting man in politics. And someone who I'm fascinated with, of course, Kentucky Senator, the junior senator from Kentucky, Rand Paul. Mitch McConnell, of course, is the senior senator. Rand Paul, prospective presidential candidate, has weighed in on Ferguson. And, I love all things Rand Paul, as all of you know. I love talking about him. I am completely fascinated by him. For those of you who may be new to the show, let me just clarify, a little disclaimer I always throw in. That does not mean that I am a Rand Paul supporter. I'm not officially endorsing Rand Paul. I just think he's very, very interesting. There are things I like about him very much. There are also some big concerns that I have about him. But when he impresses me, he really impresses me. And he has impressed me again. He wrote something for Time.com regarding Ferguson. And it's very short. Let me read it to you quickly. This is Rand Paul again weighing in on this. In Ferguson, the precipitating crime was not drugs, but theft. But the war on drugs has created a tension in some communities that too often results in tragedy. One need only witness the baby in Georgia who had a concussive grenade explode in her face during a late-night no-knock drug raid in which no drugs were found to understand the feelings of many minorities, the feeling that they are being unfairly treated. 3 out of 4 people in jail for drugs are people of color. In the African-American community, folks rightly ask, why are our sons disproportionately incarcerated, killed, and maimed? African Americans perceive as true that their kids are more likely to be killed. ProPublica examined 33 years of FBI data on police shootings, accounted for the racial makeup of our country, and determined that, quote, young black males in recent years were at far greater risk of being shot dead by police than their white counterparts, 21 times greater, unquote. Can some of the disparity be blamed on a higher rate of crime in the black community? Yes. But there is a gnawing feeling that simply being black in a high crime area increases your risk for a deadly altercation with police. Does bad behavior account for some of the interactions with law enforcement? Yes, but surely there must be ways that we can work to prevent the violence from escalating. On the other side of the coin, defenders of the war on drugs say, look at Mexico if you want to see drug violence unchecked by police power. Isn't there another alternative where we can utilize police power to counter violence, but for the most part leave nonviolent citizens alone? As I visited our nation's urban centers and predominantly white, impoverished rural areas, I sense an undercurrent of unease. It's not just lack of justice, but also a cycle of poverty to crime and back to poverty again. There is a sense of helplessness. To be sure, we all hold a certain degree of responsibility for our lives, and it's a mistake to simply blame others for our problems. Reforming criminal justice to make it racially blind is imperative, but that won't lift up these young men from poverty. In fact, I don't believe any law will. For too long, we've attached some mythic notion to government solutions, and yet, 40 years after we began the war on poverty, poverty still abounds. When you look at statistics for the white community alone, you see that we've become two separate worlds in which the successful are educated and wait to have their children until they are married, and those in poverty are primarily those without higher education and with children outside of marriage. This message is not a racial one. The link between poverty, lack of education, and children outside of marriage is staggering and cuts across all racial groups. Statistics uniformly show that waiting to have children in marriage and obtaining an education are an invaluable part of escaping poverty. I have no intention to scold, but escaping the poverty and crime trap will require more than just criminal justice reform. Escaping the poverty trap will require all of us to relearn that not only are we our brother's keeper, but we are our own keeper. While a hand up can be part of the plan, if the plan doesn't include the self-discovery of education work and the self-esteem that comes with work, the cycle of poverty will continue. I will continue to fight to end racial disparities in drug sentencing. I will continue to fight lengthy mandatory sentences that prevent judges from using discretion. Amen to that. I will continue to fight to restore voting rights for nonviolent felons who've served their sentences. But my hope is that out of tragedy, a preacher or teacher will arise, one who motivates and inspires us all to discover traits, ambitions, and moral codes that have slowly eroded and left us empty with despair. I will continue to fight to reform our nation's criminal justice system, but in the meantime, the call should go out for a charismatic leader, not a politician, to preach a gospel of hope and prosperity. I've said often America is in need of a revival. Part of that is spiritual. Part of that is in civics, in our leaders, in our institutions. We must look at policies, ideas, and attitudes that have failed us, and we must demand better. Real solutions will include a revival of spirit, purpose, and action. I, for one, pledge to be part of those solutions. So that's what Rand Paul wrote in Time, or on Time.com, his take on Ferguson. Again, I don't want to spend another minute on this. I basically agree with what he says. But here's what impresses me about him. And it's there is a thread in this in terms of what has impressed me about him in the past. He is unusual for a prospective presidential candidate, for a Republican. He is unusual, but he is part of that libertarian wing of the Republican Party. So, you know, he's bound to be unusual. It's part of what makes him, as Time magazine called him, the most interesting man in politics. What impresses me here, not just, I agree with probably 95% of what he said in there. Well, two things really. First of all, he continues to violate this sort of left-right paradigm in this country where you have to take the traditional liberal position on absolutely everything, or you have to take the traditional conservative opinion on absolutely everything. And we see that play out in everything. And as an independent, I am thrilled to see someone so consistently as he does, even as he's preparing to run for president, so consistently violate that sort of binary way of thinking, which you are expected to adhere to if you aspire to higher office in this country as a member of one of the two parties. because according to that paradigm, the threads of conversation that exist left and right in response to Ferguson typically are, the left sees it as, well, yeah, people shouldn't be looting and all that, but, once again, a white cop shot a black guy who was unarmed, and this is a problem, and there's racial disparity, and or in this case, I don't know, not exactly profiling, but there's a racial issue there. I'm stumbling over my words a little bit, but that's how the left sees it, and they'll find ways to kind of excuse some of the reaction, some of the violence in Ferguson, which is disgusting. And then the right, of course, sees it as, well, that cop was just defending himself. So, what's the big deal? The guy he shot shouldn't have been behaving like he was behaving, etc. In other words, the way the left-right paradigm plays out is, like you would expect. The left sides with the black guy, the unarmed black guy who got shot and probably wasn't a serious threat, and the right sides with the white cop who did the shooting. It's always amazing to me that so few people want to think any deeper about these things than that. And Rand Paul is an example, again, because this is not the first time he's impressed me in this way. He violates the left-right paradigm and says, I'm actually going to look at this in a manner that is a little bit deeper. I'm going to be introspective about it. I'm going to try to figure out what the root cause of these things are. I'm not, I'm a Republican, so, I'm supposed to just go with the conservatives and say, well, white cop shoots a black guy, whatever, deal with it. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to actually analyze this and think about it on a deeper level. That impresses me. You're not supposed to do that. In our highly politically polarized, extremely ideological political environment that we exist in, you're not supposed to do that. It's supposed to just be surface level judgments always. But Rand Paul, again, has rejected that. And I love that about the guy. I mean, I can't lie. I really, really respect that about him, especially when, he's going to, assuming he does run for president, to win those primaries, he's got to make the base happy. And this whole kind of stepping out of ideology and looking at things from a different angle, that's probably not going to make the base of the party very happy. And again, I'm not just saying that to slag on Republicans. The Democratic Party operates the same way. You can't really suggest or think about things in a deeper way than what the left is expecting of you, or suggesting that maybe there's something about liberal ideology that needs to change or evolve or whatever. You're not allowed to do that in either party, generally. But Rand Paul continues to do that. The other thing that impresses me too is, again, I've talked about on the show how my dream match for the 2016 presidential election is Republican Rand Paul, Republican nominee Rand Paul, versus Democratic nominee Hillary Clinton. Again, not because I'm endorsing either of them. I am not. They both have things about them I like. They both have things about them that trouble me. Personally, I don't want either of them. I want an independent to get into the race and win. I would love that. I love independence. I love seeing independents succeed. But that is my dream match because, I've talked about in terms of foreign policy, it would be kind of a role reversal in forms of the parties, because with foreign policy, you have Hillary Clinton, who, as far as I can tell, is a neoconservative in terms of her attitude toward the Middle East. I think, she did vote for the Iraq War, for example, and, she tries to kind of sort of say maybe it was a mistake now, but she kind of dances around it. And then you have Rand Paul, who is for a much more restrained, non-interventionist foreign policy. But typically it's the other way around. The Republican is the hawk, to hyper-simplify it. The Republican is the hawk, the Democrat's the dove. In this case, that would be a role reversal with Hillary Clinton and Rand Paul, and I just think that would be fascinating. We've never quite seen that in a presidential general election. But I realize now, it occurs to me, we'd see another role reversal that would be fascinating to see play out. Rand Paul would love to legalize marijuana. As a libertarian-style Republican, he'd probably like to drastically change, well, he mentions it here, he certainly wants to change sentencing laws for drugs. He'd probably, I would not be surprised if he ultimately would support full legalization of everything. Whereas Hillary Clinton, I don't know if she's even in favor of decriminalizing marijuana. So again, Rand Paul would be taking the liberal, Rand Paul would seem more liberal than Hillary on that issue. Even though Rand Paul is effectively a libertarian, I always say, while libertarians like to assimilate themselves into the Republican Party, that is where they seem to be most comfortable. There are actually also a great many issues where libertarianism actually intersects with liberalism, and it's conservatives who are kind of the odd men out on quite a few social issues like drugs, marijuana, and other issues too. Gay marriage, libertarians are typically for it. Death penalty, libertarians typically oppose it. Abortion, although that one gets a little tricky. I certainly have talked to some pro-life libertarians, but I think most libertarians are pro-choice. So these are all examples of where libertarianism and liberalism really sort of run parallel. So that would just be fascinating to see that play out. So I hope that happens, and I think it's possible. Other than that, we're going to leave Ferguson alone. I've already spent more time on that than I intended to. But again, I really kind of just wanted to address Rand Paul specifically. I want to get into immigration. Now, anyone who's heard me discuss immigration knows, I do like to remind people on the show that I'm an independent. I'm neither a conservative nor a liberal because I think I'm pretty much very centrist in my views. If you add it all up, I think I end up in the middle. I do have some liberal positions. I also have some more conservative attitudes and some libertarian ideas as well. So I don't fit comfortably in any party. However, full disclaimer, for those of you who are just going to get furious with me by the end of the show, I'll just go ahead and tell you now. So I'll save you the trouble of throwing a brick through your television if you happen to be a conservative Republican. On the issue of immigration, I come across as extremely liberal. On some issues, yeah. People sometimes think I'm much more liberal than I am conservative, and therefore I really am. They try to pigeonhole me as a liberal, and I do spend some time fighting against that and saying, no, I'm really kind of a centrist. But yes, on this issue, I'm a total liberal. Fine. You got me. Here's the thing. Okay, so we're gonna talk in a minute about Obama's executive action. By the way, what Obama did was an executive action. It was not an executive order. There is a difference. We keep hearing the media, Fox News will, hammer this point into the ground all day long. I don't know if you really hammer something into the ground. You hammer nails. Drive this point into the ground. Not drive. I mean, it is drive. It's not hammer. I think the snow is affecting my my brain. Oh, God, I hate winter. I have snow on the brain. It's an executive action, and there is a difference, and we'll get to that. Let me tell you how I really feel. And I've expressed this on the show before, so I'll try not to spend a lot of time telling you why I feel the way that I do. But I've never really cared much that there are undocumented workers in the country. Doesn't mean I'm necessarily for open borders, but I've just kind of not really been overly concerned. We sort of have this, some have, I've heard call it a sort of a de facto amnesty already. Although the Obama administration and Fox News and conservative talk radio won't tell you this, but they've actually been very aggressive with deportations up to now, obviously, up until this executive action. So Obama hasn't exactly been a friend to these folks. Again, that's something, there are certain things that conservative media won't mention about Obama because they don't want you to ever hear anything that makes you say, oh, well, I kind of like that about him, because it's, you know, if you're a Republican or if you're a conservative, again, it's that whole left-right paradigm thing, and you can only think one or the other. So if you're a Republican, if you're a conservative, you are required to hate Obama with every cell of your being, assume that everything he does is absolutely horrible, and that he is a Kenyan-born Muslim terrorist who secretly is going to, any day now, issue an executive order to destroy our constitutional republic and form some new hybrid of communism and Sharia law. I don't personally believe that to be the case, but so so there are certain things that the right won't mention. One is the administration has not been a friend to these people in terms of deportations. They've been more aggressive than any other administration prior. That's a fact. That is a statistical fact. They also won't tell you, this is completely off subject, but they won't tell you how aggressive the Obama administration has been with drone strikes overseas. Far more aggressive than the Bush administration was. Far more. Barack Obama is a terrorist killing machine with these drone strikes. He's Bush on steroids. Now, the right doesn't like to bring that up because then, you know, you might think, oh, well, I kind of like that about him. That's cool. Ann Coulter, actually, of all people, this was during the 2012 elections. Ann Coulter was on, I think it was Piers Morgan. And Piers Morgan asked her, is there anything about President Obama that you like? And to her credit, she actually acknowledged that there is something about him that she likes. She said, well, I do like the drone strikes. He's been really aggressive with that, and I like that. That was her speaking, not me. I'm not so sure about the drone strikes, but that's another topic. We're going to get way off if I go down that road. The point is, Obama is not the peacenik, communist, Muslim, whatever that the right wants you to believe that he is. Yeah, he's a liberal. He's a liberal Democrat. That's how I see him. Freaks some people out that he's black. I'm okay with it. By the way, I'm sort of kidding. I'm not suggesting that all Republicans are racist or anything, because I know that absolutely to be not true. But I think some Republicans are. I do think that that is why some Republicans have a problem deep down with Obama. Probably more so in the southern half of the country. Again, I'm saying some. It may be, who knows, it may be a very small number. I don't know. But, I mean, come on, there are some. Of course there are. There's always going to be racism. Here's why I've never cared that much. To me, we are not honest with ourselves as a country about illegal immigration. I firmly believe this. Some of you, maybe most of you, maybe all of you will reject this, but this is how I see it. We invite them in. And then we expend all this energy and anguish and anger pretending that we don't. And I say that because if we really wanted to protect that border, to seal that border, we could. It's not impossible. Look, take the resources that currently exist. I only learned, I think maybe within the last year, about these interior checkpoints, which we might come back to, where, 60, 80 miles inland from the border, there are border patrol people who set up checkpoints on highways. and profile people. And if they pull you over at this checkpoint and you happen to have a Hispanic last name, or you talk with an accent that doesn't sound quite American to them, then they're asking you all these questions, and they want to see your papers and are you a citizen and all that. Completely unconstitutional, by the way. But why is it that we can do that? We can expend resources to do that, these unconstitutional interior checkpoints, but we can't protect the border itself? We can't take these people at these checkpoints and move them to the border itself? We can't build a fence? Everybody's been talking about that for years. Got to build that fence. There's all this high-tech gadgetry we can use. Here's what I firmly believe is the real reason. The real reason is the people who are really in charge don't want that border sealed. They never have, they never will, so they make sure it doesn't happen. And again, when I say the people who are really in charge, I know how that sounds. I don't mean that in some sort of conspiratorial way. I'm not talking about a bunch of Freemasons and people from the Trilateral Commission sitting in a room or at the Bohemian Grove, talking about how, we got to make sure that border's never sealed. I don't mean that. I just mean the people who are really in charge, big business, the corporations, the farming lobby, which is very powerful in Washington, D.C., who wants to make sure that that border remains porous because they depend on the cheap labor. You need people to pick oranges cheap. You want those. You want those people coming over the border into the country. If you own a factory and you're in a border town, you want that cheap labor. There are jobs Americans won't do. I'm sorry, but there are. They don't want that border sealed. Some people vote Republican because they think that the Republican Party cares so much about this issue that they will fix it. We just got to get more Republicans in charge, and they will finally deal with this. Take care of that border. Never going to happen. Prior to Obama, we had 8 years of a Republican president. That border fence we're supposed to have? How much of that got built under George W. Bush? I think there's a mile of it in Arizona or something. It'll never happen because the people who really run things, both parties, it's not just Democrats. I know a lot of Republicans like to think, oh, those liberals, they just want open borders. They keep stopping us from fixing the problem. Come on. It's naive. It's not just Democrats. It's both parties. It's a scam. They've totally scammed us. We really can't secure that border. We really can't figure out a way to secure our southern border. Come on. They don't want to. They play this game where they talk about it like it's so important because we know how important it is to the American people and blah, 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 blah. It's all BS. It'll never happen. There are times when the Republicans are in control. Historically, sometimes the Democrats are in control, sometimes Republicans are in control, sometimes you have divided government like we have now. We have a Republican Congress, but a Democratic president. But there have been times when Republicans have been in control. So where's our fence? Come on, it's a scam. And that's why I don't care. Several weeks ago on Rock, Paper, Hand Grenades, the show that I do with the Honorable Gary S. Hopper, my favorite Republican, he had to be out for a few weeks, and Jane Cormier filled in for him, and I love Jane. We don't agree politically because she's very conservative. I think even more so than Gary. But she's I got to know her. She's a wonderful person. Personally, I like her very much. I don't think I'd ever vote for her for anything, but no, actually, I'm not even necessarily serious about that because I do believe her to be a person of integrity, and sometimes that's more important. But I do remember the look of horror on her face when I said we were discussing illegal immigration, and I kind of said, I really don't care that much. Just let them come in, whatever. I don't even care. And she's kind of, I think she was genuinely shocked when I said that. But, I'm not an ideologue. I'm a pragmatist. And I just look at whatever issue it is, and I just want to solve problems. Where there's a problem, I want to solve it. I don't want to think about what's the liberal solution, what's the conservative solution, what's the libertarian solution, whatever. I just want to solve it. And to me, part of the problem-solving process is you go through and you eliminate all the options, all the solutions that people bandy about that are either unworkable, unpractical, impossible, or maybe could happen and maybe would work, but politically are never, ever going to happen. So let's go through the things that are never, ever going to happen. We're never going to seal the border. And I think deep down we all know that. Unless Ted Cruz is president, and even then it's not going to happen. Okay, so let's take that off the list. Border security, never going to happen. Never going to build a fence. Never going to line guard dogs around the thing. Whatever people think we're going to do. Build a moat. I don't know. Never going to happen. Round them all up and send them home. Never going to happen. I wouldn't agree with that anyway. But even if I did, it's never going to happen. And even if you do think we should do that, is that really where you want to expend our law enforcement resources? Do you really care that much about, Juan down at some restaurant on Elm Street in Manchester washing dishes that, he might not be here legally. We might have to look into that. I'd like law enforcement solving crimes, rapes, murders, things like that. I'm not really worried about Juan washing dishes. I've met Juan. He seems like a nice kid. Just leave him alone. Okay, so we're not going to secure the border. We're not going to round them all up and send them home. What else? Hey, here's an idea. Why don't we do something that brings them out of the shadows into the system, and we know they're here, etc. Hey, that's a great idea. So we should have comprehensive immigration reform. There's number 3 on our list of things that will never, ever happen. We will never have immigration reform. Not true immigration reform. I know if you're a Republican, you're saying, well, not now we won't because Obama had to do that executive action. No, we wouldn't anyway. I am absolutely convinced that this Republican Party will never, would never, could never actually be serious about reforming immigration, especially now. See, I know some people optimistically thought, well, okay, they retook control of the Senate in the midterms, so now they're in control of Congress. Now there can finally be some Republican immigration reform. Now they're going to get serious about immigration reform. Why would they? They have no incentive to. Think about it. In the 2012 election cycle, one of the things in the postmortem of the presidential election was, people talked about, well, Romney didn't appeal to Hispanics. A lot of Republicans lost. A lot of other Republicans lost because they didn't appeal to Hispanics, because the Republican Party is not very Hispanic friendly, because they're always talking about wanting to deport people and this and that. Romney with his self-deportation and all that, right? So the line was, the line of thinking after the 2012 election was, the Republican Party, to remain relevant, must find a way to bridge that, not bridge that gap, but to reach out to Hispanics, and be more Hispanic friendly. Not that they weren't thinking about that prior to the election itself. I do remember Mitt Romney hilariously going on Telemundo with, I'm sure most of you have seen the clip, or if you remember, he had on this incredible spray-on tan, which made him look very dark, which he had for that one day. And it worked. It made him look Hispanic. But it was funny. Not intentionally funny, but I thought it was hilarious. Anyway, so the line of thinking was, okay, so Republicans lost big, so Republicans need to find a way to change their message and to seem more favorable to Hispanics. Well, Republicans then talked about it and then didn't do it. And instead, the Tea Party continued to wield their influence, and you had a Republican Party who continued to seem like they wanted nothing to do with any sort of immigration reform. Eric Cantor talked about immigration reform, and they punished him for it. He got primaried out by a Tea Partier. And guess what? It actually all worked out for them. Instead of embracing Hispanics, they continued to upset Hispanics and push them away. And it turned out fine. Turns out they don't need the Hispanics because they won big in the midterms. So now there's no way. They'll still talk about it. See, now they talk about it because now it's a convenient talking point. Oh, we were going to do immigration reform. This time we were really going to do it, but then the president, Emperor Obama, had to sign that executive order. Oh, if he hadn't done that, well, we could have worked together. Like that was ever going to happen. We could have finally gotten something done to truly reform immigration. No. Come on. It was never going to happen, and it's especially not going to happen now because now they have proven to themselves, Hispanics, they don't need you. They can continue to not care about you. They can continue to not care about how they look to you. They don't need you. All the white guys are still going to vote for them. It's fine. You can all self-deport, whatever. Who cares? So the only way that this was ever going to happen is if Obama did something by executive action. And it is an executive action. It's not an executive order. This is the only way, and I am 100% completely fine with it. Not only because I think it needed to be done, not only because I don't care that these people are here, not only because, well, let me put it this way. It's been done before by Republican presidents. Reagan, of course, Reagan, everyone's conservative hero, Saint Reagan. Ronald Reagan, first he signed the bill. There was a sweeping immigration reform and amnesty that happened in 1986. And then, and this is the part of the story that conservatives try to leave out, but it's getting to a point where they can't ignore it anymore. Then in 1987, Reagan signed an executive order broadening the parameters of the law that he had signed. Oh, Reagan, how lawless of him. He should have been impeached for that. That's unconstitutional, thinking he can go ahead and sign an executive order, even though every president signs executive orders. But, you can't say that about Reagan. Nor would I want to. I have no problem with what he did. But, and then George H.W. Bush, he signed an executive order on immigration. Should have impeached him for that, right? How lawless. What did he think he was, an emperor? So this isn't anything new. But when Obama does it, now we're talking about, not seriously, but they're talking about impeaching him. They're calling him Emperor Obama. They're calling him lawless. Not that that started with this. I mean, Obama, who, if I'm not mistaken, has been pretty miserly with executive orders in comparison to previous presidents, because he knows if, the scary black man does anything, the right freaks out and calls him an emperor and whatnot. He knows that. He knew that going in. But, they were calling him, Boehner wanted to sue him, and I guess that's going forward now. The lawsuit suing the president for issuing executive orders to delay certain parts of Obamacare. Even though that's kind of stuff has been done by previous presidents. George W. Bush, when Medicare or Medicaid, I always get confused on that, Part D was being phased in. There were specific parts of it that were delayed by Bush. He signed executive orders to delay them, specific parts of the law. Obama does that with Obamacare, and they freak out and say, oh, he's lawless. He can't do that. Look, again, I'm not a member of either party. I'm not an Obama supporter. I mean, I support him on immigration. I think he's right about this, but I've had plenty of my own criticisms of him. I didn't vote for him in 2012. I went third party. I voted for Gary Johnson, the independent. I certainly couldn't vote for Governor 47%, but I didn't vote for Obama either. You know, some things I like about Obama, some things I don't. If we had had a President Romney, I'd probably say the same thing. There's some things I like about him, some things I don't. Okay. But the right has become this sort of caricature of themselves. The way they, this guy tries to do anything, and they talk about impeachment, and they call him lawless, and they call him an emperor. And I mean, it's really just like cartoon banana republic kind of stuff, the way these guys talk. Especially Boehner with the Obamacare lawsuit, wanting to sue Obama for delaying the implementation of the mandate, which is one of the key provisions in the Affordable Care Act that Republicans hate to begin with and don't think should be in there. That very thing Obama decides to delay, and they're suing him over delaying the very thing that they don't even think should be there to begin with. I mean, it's bizarre. The modern Republican Party, with at least in Washington, is just, I don't know. I mean, I'm trying to be kind because, you know, I have a lot of friends who are Republicans, but the Republicans I know, most of them that I know personally, are good, reasonable people, and I'm sure most of the Republicans in Washington, D.C. were good, reasonable people at one time. But they just get caught up in that partisanship and that extremism and this bizarre stuff. I mean, hearing someone talk about impeaching the president for issuing an executive order is just it's crazy talk. It really is strange to me. You guys have just gone off the rails. Hey, we only got him for 2 more years. Can't you suck it up a little bit? Because it's getting kind of embarrassing. But again, and wow, we're already, the time goes so fast. But again, he's doing something that other presidents have done. I saw something... So many different ways we could go here, and we only have a little time left. This was on HuffPost. This actually was last week. Federalist Society legal scholars begrudgingly accept Obama's immigration powers. Let me just read this to you, because these are some people on the right who, like Rand Paul, will tend to, try to look at things a little deeper, apparently. Last Thursday evening, word spread on Capitol Hill that House Speaker John Boehner was considering suing President Obama over his executive action to grant deportation relief for millions of undocumented immigrants. Hours later, a conservative columnist, Charles Krauthammer, appeared on Fox News and floated the idea that an executive action would be an impeachable offense. When Boehner and Krauthammer, arguably the top political and intellectual leaders of the GOP, suggest lawsuits and impeachment, it comes with more than a dollop of significance. Across town, however, a far different type of conversation was taking place among an equally robust part of the conservative movement. At the Mayflower Hotel, lawyers gathered for the annual Federalist Society National Convention, one of the highest profile conservative legal events of the year. The day's big draws were the opening speech by Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia and an event featuring Justice Samuel Alito. Before the crowd changed into black tie attire for Alito's appearance, however, a smaller panel convened under the title Federalism, the President's Duty to Take Care That the Law Be Faithfully Executed. Panelists discussed major confrontations between the branches of government, from enforcement of marijuana law and the implementation of health care to Obama's impending executive order on immigration. I say impending because this was right before he announced his executive order. The talk was, well, lawyerly. Every conclusion seemed to have a qualification attached to it. But, by and large, the panelists agreed that the president has wide legal latitude to prioritize and shape deportation laws, as regrettable for Republicans or the long-term balance of powers that may be. Said Christopher Schroeder, the Charles S. Murphy Professor of Law and Public Policy Studies at Duke Law School, quote, "I think the roots of prosecutorial discretion are extremely deep. The practice is long and robust. The case law is robust. Let me put it this way. Suppose some president came to me and asked me in the Office of Legal Counsel, is it okay for me to go ahead and defer the deportation proceedings of childhood arrival? Under the present state of law, I think that would be an easy opinion to write yes." Schroeder was speaking specifically about the deferred action program that Obama has already put into place. You know, all those kids showing up at the border and the DREAM Act. The one affecting so-called, I'm sorry, it is referring to the DREAM Act. The one affecting so-called dreamers who were brought into the U.S. as children, which I completely agree with the DREAM Act, by the way. No surprise there, I'm sure. But later, Schroeder expanded his legal reasoning and said, quote, "I don't know where in the Constitution there is a rule that if the president's enactment affects too many people, he's violating the Constitution. There is a difference between executing the law and making the law, but in the world in which we operate, that distinction is a lot more problematic than you would think. If the Congress has enacted a statute that grants discretionary authority for the administrative agency or the president to fill in the gaps, to write the regulations that actually make the statute operative, those regulations, to all intents and purposes, make the law. I agree this can make us very uncomfortable. I just don't see the argument for unconstitutionality at this juncture." So that was his quote. For those cheering on the Obama administration as the president gets set to unveil his executive action, this is the nut of it. There is a history dating back to the 70s of presidents using prosecutorial discretion when it comes to deportations. That those prior actions were smaller in scope doesn't change the legal foundation upon which they and future ones rest. If conservative legal scholars agree, that's not just affirmation, it's gravy. John Baker Jr., midway through Schroeder's remark, he's a visiting professor at Georgetown, said, quote, "I'm not disagreeing with you as its purpose the goal of destabilizing, that this is as its purpose the goal of destabilizing the republic," unquote. But he also made the case that the way to stop a president this hell-bent on destruction was neither through lawsuits nor impeachment. It's through cleaner legislative language. There's more to this, but, you know, that gets to the heart of it. I mean, you know, these are conservative lawyers arguing that Obama, whether they like it or not, he's within his legal authority to do this. Again, this is nothing new. Prior presidents have done it. Rachel Maddow made a big splash recently on her show on MSNBC when she talked about how both Reagan and Bush had taken similar action in terms of immigration law. And let's see. Well, you know what? We're not gonna go to that right now because we are almost out of time. Let me just read this to you quickly. We'll leave the Rachel because she did this whole big long thing, but we're rapidly running out of time. This is from the Associated Press from November 17th. Andrew Taylor writes, 2 GOP presidents acted unilaterally on immigration. Let me read this to you quickly. 2 presidents have acted unilaterally on immigration, and both were Republican. Ronald Reagan and his successor, George H.W. Bush, extended amnesty to family members who were not covered by the last major overhaul of immigration law in 1986. Neither faced the political uproar widely anticipated if and when President Barack Obama uses his executive authority to protect millions of immigrants from deportation. Reagan's and Bush's actions were conducted in the wake of a sweeping bipartisan immigration overhaul and at a time when amnesty was not a dirty word. Their actions were less controversial because there was a consensus in Washington that the 1986 law needed a few fixes, and Congress was poised to act on them. Obama is acting as the country and Washington are bitterly divided over a broken immigration system and what to do about 11 million people living in the U.S. illegally. Obama wants to extend protection from deportation to millions of immigrant parents and spouses of U.S. citizens and permanent residents and expand this 2-year-old program that shields immigrants brought illegally to this country as children. A Tea Party-influenced GOP is poised to erupt if and when Obama follows through on his promise. Again, this was written prior to the executive action. Let me skip down to, because we are almost out of time. Let me just, we'll quickly address the timeline on this prior to Obama. 1986, Congress and Reagan enacted a sweeping overhaul that gave legal status to up to 3 million immigrants without authorization to be in the country if they had come to the U.S. before 1982. Spouses and children who could not meet that test did not qualify, which incited protests that the new law was breaking up families. 1987, early efforts in Congress to amend the law to cover family members failed. This is important. Reagan's Immigration and Naturalization Service Commissioner announced that minor children of parents granted amnesty by the law would get protection from deportation. So in other words, Congress wasn't doing what needed to be done, so Reagan did something. Wow, kind of like what Obama just did. Congress wasn't doing anything, couldn't get anything done, never was going to. I firmly believe that they never were going to, so Obama did something. Obama asking, and this will make Republicans' heads explode when I say this, but I would say Obama's actions in this matter were downright Reagan-esque. Somewhere somebody's throwing a brick through their television or computer. I know it, but all right. So that fixed that. Quickly in 1989, by a sweeping 81-17 vote, the Senate in July voted to prohibit deportations of family members of immigrants covered by the 1986 law, but the House failed to act. So again, Congress failed in 1989. The Senate voted to fix something with the law, and the House couldn't get it done. So what happens? In 1990, President George H.W. Bush, acting through the Immigration and Naturalization Service, established a family fairness provision in which family members living with a legalizing immigrant who were in the U.S. before the passage of the 1986 law were granted protection from deportation and authorized to seek employment. This affected about 1.5 million people. This was, again, in response to Congress failing to get that done the prior year. So, again, Congress couldn't get it done, so George H.W. Bush did something by executive action. But Obama does it, and he's lawless, he's an emperor, we have to impeach him. Blah, 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 blah. Craziness. It's crazy talk. Anywho, happy Thanksgiving. If you are watching us live on Wednesday, I will be back at 4 o'clock for Norm and Friends. Norm's regular co-host, Lori Powers Otto, can't be here this week, so I'll be filling in. So it'll be like old times. And so that'll be fun. And of course, I'll be back later with Gary on rock, paper, hand grenades. That will be it for all, or that will be it for now. I told you the snow's affecting my brain. I got snow on the brain. And I will talk at y'all a little bit later. Thanks, everybody.